Hardman, 41 receptions last season. He had 4 touchdowns. Kind of struggles to get released despite his speed. Like I fell into the trap of the off-season workout videos. I was buying in. I was like, man, Hardman's going to have a great year. He looks like he's running better routes. He's going to make a jump. The special teams value was up and down, as it was with Robinson as well. If the Chiefs are listening, please don't let Robinson return kickoffs or punts this season. Um, Kind of Hardman stuck in that slot role. Now, with that said, I don't think that means he has to be stuck in that number 3 role like you were talking about. I don't know what his PFF grades are. I think that he's a guy that could make a leap and become a better slot option. And if he is that better slot option because there's no clear cut X, he could be maybe second in targets if he makes that big improvement.
Yeah, and you can absolutely be a slot specific wide receiver and be the number 1 or number 2 receiver on your team. Juju Smith-Schuster does it with Pittsburgh. Over 80% of his targets come from the slot. CeeDee Lamb does it with Dallas. Over 90% of his targets come from the slot. Cole Beasley does it for Buffalo. Over 90% of his targets come from the slot. Tyler Boyd with Cincinnati. Over 90% of his targets come from the slot. So the idea that both your top 2 wide receivers had to be outside guys or anything like that, definitely not the case. Hardman could easily be the number 2 wide receiver on this team and be a slot specific wide receiver. And Tyreek Hill is a guy who gets a ton of his targets from the slot, well over half of them actually. So Tyreek Hill and Mecole Hardman and Travis Kelce can all do their work from the slot and be just fine as the top 3 options.
Yeah, absolutely. And a guy we touched on Pringle, there's really just not a ton to say about him. You know, he's kind of a guy that never ran with the chances given to him. Granted, he hasn't gotten a lot. He has the size to be that X type guy, not necessarily the chops for it. The numbers are probably lukewarm on him. I've never looked at his PFF grades. Like, I don't know if you have to register a certain amount of snaps. It seems like that guy doesn't even, like, he borders upon the full sample size or the required amount, because he has a couple games where either someone gets injured or he just is the hot hand. I don't even know if he qualifies for something like that.
Yeah, he's had a small sample size. That in his small sample size, he's had some good games, but it is a small sample size indeed. So it's tough to like promote Pringle that much. Pringle deserves more than he's getting in terms of snaps, but we were also saying that with like Dorian O'Daniel and Willie Gay at the linebacker position. Uh, and I mean, it just hasn't happened really. So, I mean, Pringle, I would like to see more of him, but if we don't, it's not the end of the world as long as someone else can step up as the number 2, whether that's Hardman or Pringle or Hardman or Robinson or Powell, whoever. So Pringle, I'd like to see more, but there are other guys who seem to be ahead of him in the depth chart.
100%. And a guy that I think by the end of the year could be that number 2 receiver. Like, I really believe in this guy. I think Cornell Powell, man, he burst onto the scene as a 5th-year senior, had, I think it was like 800 and some odd yards and 7 touchdowns in his 5th season at Clemson. He was there for quite a while. He has the size to be the X. He's gotten comps to Sammy Watkins for some of the stuff. He does the little things really well, can get release as a physical guy, not an insane athlete, but a solid one. A guy that I think with Robinson, he's always been a good athlete, but compared to the players he plays with, he doesn't stand out. Like, he doesn't have that speed, that burst, kind of a vertical threat that can make some things happen. Like that Raiders game, everyone clings to that and says, oh, that's Demarcus Robinson when he's on. I'm like, he just had a really good game, and that can happen. He's not that crazy of a receiver. Cornell Powell, I think, could be a consistent threat. I mean, he's a guy that did some of his damage with Trevor Lawrence out. Like, there's reasons to not believe it, like that maybe it's fool's gold, he was a blip on the radar or something. But I think the tape shows that he was a really good option and that the rest of his game could be advanced enough to make an impact somewhat early on.
Absolutely. Cornell Powell, his efficiency numbers were pretty nasty in terms of receivers with like 70 plus targets last year. He was top 20 in yards per route run. He was really going off with his basic numbers as well, having 16.6 yards per reception. Like, that's nuts. He had almost 1,000 yards in how many games is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 games and nearly 1,000 yards is pretty good. So Powell's college numbers look very promising for specifically this year, because this is the only year he got a chance for Clemson with how loaded Clemson is. I love the Powell pick, especially for day three. Day three, getting this guy, very talented guy, very promising. And I think he definitely has a good chance of being a good number two.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad you mentioned talent, because that is one of the words that is used to describe this guy, or kind of used to build an argument. And then we'll move on to linebackers after that. But Antonio Callaway, talent is what a lot of people try to sell him on. And I definitely get it, because he does have a ton of it. Not a factor in 2020, not much of a factor in 2019. As a rookie in 2018, 586 yards, 5 touchdowns, has the downfield speed and the vertical ability to be a nice complement to the offense. But with a guy that isn't very high on the depth chart, he's going to have to work his way up through special teams, possibly. He doesn't have that experience. Is the rest of his game advanced enough to make an impact? We talk about Powell. Callaway doesn't do the little things very well, in comparison to some other guys. So I think that he has his work cut out for him, not only if he wants to make the roster, but also to make an impact. So there is a certain upside with that move, I think, with Antonio Callaway.
Mhm.
But the floor could literally be someone who doesn't even make it out of training camp on the team.
Yeah, I remember Antonio Callaway heading into his draft, and I thought, okay, this guy looks like he could be an interesting player. And unfortunately for him, it hasn't really turned out. He had, I think, I remember him having some good moments in his rookie year, but after that, it's like really slowed down for him, unfortunately. I think there's a chance you could find something out of it, just muster something out of there. But if not, then hey, at least we got as many options as we do.